You've obviously sort of set out this failure to, this lack of curiosity in the threats to our democratic processes. While obviously ministers have questions to answer about that, do you also think that the spy chiefs, the spy masters who are in charge of the agencies should have been more forceful in gripping what you describe as a hot potato and getting to the bottom of whether or not there was actually Russian interference in the Brexit referendum?
Primarily, this is a political question. Should the government have instructed this work to be undertaken? And the answer is yes, of course it should have. As to the question about heads of agencies, only MI5 can self-task and direct work itself. The other agencies would require to be asked to do it. So yes, MI5 perhaps should have done this work, but more importantly, and I think you led it off very cleverly, the lack of curiosity, particularly after the DNC hack and leak episode. One would have assumed someone at the heart of government might have wanted to know if the efficacy of democratic processes in the UK was being undermined, if discordant messages were being amplified, if there was an attempt to actually change the result. That work has not been done.
I think there's quite rightly, I think, in our democracy, a reluctance for the security service to directly get involved in the political process. I think that's a given. But I think what is not excusable here, as Stewart has just outlined, that no one in government, in terms of ministerial level or above, actually looked at the flashing lights that were there already in terms of the Scottish referendum and the issue in terms of the Democratic Party in the United States. And that is a political question, and that is one that should have been looked at. And in terms of failures, that is a major failure because we say in the report, if we discovered, for example, interference, could we have quantified its effect on elections? No, we couldn't. I don't think you could. But at least I think we could have actually known what the threat was, but also measures in the future we could take to mitigate against those threats.
Deborah, have another go.
Thank you. Obviously, you can't say categorically whether or not there was Russian interference in the Brexit referendum, but given all the evidence that you have heard, what is your best guess? Do you believe that Russia did try to influence that vote? And just a second follow-up, if I may. You talked about how that standard government line that we've heard so many times, that there's been no evidence of successful interference. Do you believe that that was the government being deliberately evasive to avoid the fact that they just simply don't know because they haven't looked?
Well, I'm not sure if it was being evasive or if it was trying to just be a little too cute. And as Kevan said, it would be impossible to quantify the impact of interference. So in the sense that it's impossible to prove whether that interference had been successful or otherwise. The key point, though, and you allude to it in your question, they had not sought even to ask that question, and that's at the heart of this report.
Deborah, I think the question is this, and I think there's obviously a misunderstanding of the role of this committee. We deal with evidence. We have extensive powers, including access to some of the most highly classified and secret material that is available to government. There was no evidence that we saw, and the reason why there was no evidence, because no one had actually asked for the work to be done. So in terms of saying, did Russia interfere in the EU referendum, you can't say that, but no one in government asked that either. So on the evidence we saw, I think we came to the conclusion that we can't make a judgment call, and Stewart's right, even if there had been an investigation into it, quantifying the effect of that actually on the result would be very difficult. But we saw no evidence because there was no evidence, and no one in government sought to look or asked the questions that needed to be asked.
One more, Deborah?
Well, I mean, given that that's your finding, are you now going to, are you demanding that they do go and look and find out? And will you, as a committee, be following up this inquiry and investigating and finding out conclusively whether or not Russia did influence in our democratic events like the referendum?
Well, we cannot ask the agencies to do work. We can only ask them to tell us what they already know. But it's self-evident from the publication of this report that the government should now sit up and pay attention, and we have welcomed, as I said, the work that they appear to have done in relation to 2019, but we've yet to see the evidence of that. What we've also said is the committee will now look at any evidence which comes forward in relation to what's happened 2019 and beyond. But we would also agree, and it's in the report, with the DCMS Select Committee, which has made a similar request to government in the past, that it should try to understand the scale and nature of the interference in previous electoral and democratic events.
What I would say is this, is we had a written ministerial statement last week suggesting that, from the Foreign Secretary, suggesting that Russia had interfered in the 2019 general election. We have seen no evidence of that because we've not been provided with any of the intelligence which supports that statement. We've asked to see it. But the important point here, I think, is that in terms of the protecting a democratic process, lessons should have been learned, or at least the question should have been asked, and they weren't. So if, and the report is very clear, we suggest government should now do it. But as Stewart said, we can't task the agencies or anyone else to undertake this review.